you that question because they took care of me.
It's always a good thing.
Huh? Oh, I'm just so happy to be here.
That's the first I've got to sit down all day.
I'll tell you.
I can't read anymore.
If not, it's okay. He said, call me 3 times. I mean,
Hey, Robert.
Yes.
Who's the new guy beside you?
Careful now. What do you mean? I've only gone 1 week. Come on now.
Ask you a question. Because of the Board of Control.
There's a procedure on this because we're going into committee of all start and talking about this. Doesn't need to be moved and seconded, but group discussion first before the second is read. So
Kind of, President, usually when I'm in here, I ask him, what's your pleasure? We don't discuss it now or later.
okay,
So that's what I do.
And that's really the way it should be done.
you've been doing well.
But that's fine.
Pretty much
That
everything.
makes absolute sense.
Now I know that things are organized and you know what you're doing. I feel like I'm just kind of muddling through stuff, so it's a process.
I mean, either way. Either way.
Did you get Vi's message?
Think it what?
Did you get Vi's message? I didn't think she got to it, too.
No, but you know what I found out was that my email is full. My email has been full.
Yeah, I know, I tried calling you.
So I cleared out my email.
No.
I mean, my voicemail. My voicemail got full.
She said, yes, I left a message, Jennifer. Yes, I did. And I said, well, we haven't heard back from him. No. I said, well, I'll give him your number, nothing else.
Okay. Yeah. And that's fine. I mean, I'll be happy to call her, but I didn't get a message from her.
I didn't think so.
Yeah, talking about doing it. They're in,
I'll talk to you.
I think a lot of others are probably gonna fall into place too, probably eventually. A lot of communities.
She said it was okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
I wanted to check first.
right. Yeah, right, right.
I now call the Norton City Regular Council meeting to order Monday, June 11th, 2018. Time is 7:01 p.m. Please rise for Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silent prayer. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Gaynor?
Here.
Mr. McClone?
Here.
Mr. Courant?
Here.
Mr. Towsley?
Here.
Ms. Whipke?
Here.
Mr. Kernan?
Here.
Mr. Pilat?
Here. First item on tonight's agenda, just like to acknowledge Council's receipt of the May 2018 budget report. Next item is Summit County Engineers Office Road Maintenance Program. Mr. Grant.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I understand, we've done things a little bit backwards here, so this is a correction or fix to the problem we have of being out of order, things that weren't really done properly. And do we need to have further discussion? We talked about this last week. Do we need further explanation from Robert, Mr. Fowler?
If you care to elaborate.
Apparently, there's a history, unfortunately, with the county engineer's office. In 2016, a similar matter happened, and council, on their break, became aware that they were paving the roads designated at that time. There was a procedure put in place that was not followed. It's very disheartening that Mr. Gaynor called and said, hey, they're paving the road out here. What's going on? And I couldn't give him an answer because we were not made aware. So we were given the contract, I believe, Thursday or Friday of last week. And I did email that to everyone. So hopefully going forward, that when they bid this, they let us know and they send us the contract so that we can pass it at our level when we receive the bids back.
And just for the public's information, we bid out jobs through the county for the road program. County went ahead and accepted those bids and started repaving roads. However, they failed to get the contract to us and for us to sign it, pass it here on council, then get it back to county. So anyways, they got in a little bit of a hurry there, so administrator went ahead and told them to cease. And but I think they were pretty close to being done at this point, so guess that didn't stop anything, but now we have to pass the necessary legislation to take care of that.
Correct.
So as this is in committee, if there's no further questions?
I do. When did we first find out that when Jack called, Mr. Gaynor called?
We had discussions. Mr. White had indicated to us, because they were asking what to do with the grindings, and I said, well, I don't know that we're really close for that, but so I had given a few people that had asked the contact information of the successful bidder, and I was unaware of the paving until Mr. Gaynor informed me. And then I called the county because I asked who's the representative. I even sent an email to Dave White asking him who's in charge of the project, because they're supposed to have what we call an RPR, regional or representative project person that's on the site, making sure they install the road as we had indicated. I wanted to talk to that person. I have yet to get that. I got Sam Ross's name at the county. So I don't even know if we have a project representative on site, which is something I think some of the council folks have indicated to me that we want it.
Okay. There were 3 roads on for bidding that they put out for us. Carillon and Rich Road was also on here, but we're only doing Reimer through them.
That's correct. What had happened was, once we were given the bid results, we took them to another vendor, asked that vendor to give us an estimate to do those roads, and those estimates came in about 30% of what the bid price was. So I think that let's use, Rich was 127 maybe? It was 109, somewhere in the hundreds. But we were told we could pave that with asphalt for in the 35 to 40 range. It's at that point that we said that we could do get a better price by bidding on our own. So we took the avenue of bidding on our own. We started that process late April, early May, because we had to draw specs and advertise for 2 weeks and subsequently get bids submitted.
Actually, Rich was 91,000. And Carillon was 112, and those was both Perrin that had those low bids on here. Parent. And then, because we ended up going with Perrin for Reimer Road. And the reason I asked about when did we find out what this was, and did we removed the other two roads, Rich and Carillon, is that right?
And Swain. And Swain was bid as well.
Okay, well, Swain's not on here.
The bid results that I was given did not have Swain because they were motor pave, and there was only one bid on there. Didn't I put that on the sheet that I sent to council? There should be a number for Swain on the bottom that I got from the county engineer. I emailed him last week and asked him what that was, because I wanted to include that in your packet that I sent regarding the paving. But we rejected all those. One thing I've talked to some of the council people about, I want asphalt rather than motor pave. Asphalt lasts longer and it's easier to repair.
Okay, the point behind this is we found out so late that when we bid our roads out earlier in May, we could have had these on there if we had been made aware, correct?
The list that we bid out was the list that Larry Hess had provided, saying that he felt that these roads were the ones in most need of repavement. We talked about traffic and other factors. He felt that these streets that were bid were in more disrepair than Rich and Carillon.
So that's why we left
That's
them
why
off?
we left them off of our
It had
bidding.
nothing to do with the fact that
No.
we didn't know that they weren't going to get done at that
No,
time?
ma'am. No, ma'am. Not whatsoever. The conversation that I had with Larry was we were trying to identify the roads that we spend an inordinate amount of time trying to patch and repair. And then we're trying to look at next year. There's a couple streets that we identified for next year that we would like to mill and fill and be a little more proactive. Really what I think we should do is try to bid out a certain number of dollars with the county and see if we get a good deal and then bid our own. The problem we have with the county, I don't know that's a problem per se, but you're only getting the very big contractors. It's a $3 to $5 million project. So a company, in order to get that, has to put a bond up for $3 to $5 million guaranteeing the work. Not all the small companies can afford that, and that cost of that bond is rolled into the cost of the project. So if we're only doing $700,000, $500,000 of work in-house, we can get a smaller contractor that doesn't have to pay that big bond that could do the work, much like Sable did our parking lot, because that bid was small. The bid is only the price of the bid. The bid bond is the price of the bid. So essentially what it does is it guarantees the work at that price.
Thank you.
I've got a question, if I may. Just for my own clarification, was Reimer Road started without administrative or council approval, knowledge, agreement, whatever?
Yes.
So, and I'm not suggesting council do this, but just for my own technical understanding, what if council said, no, we don't want to pay this? Who's responsible?
The county.
Okay.
I've had this conversation with the person in charge, saying that this is not acceptable. It puts me into a bad spot.
Right.
It puts all of us in a bad spot, not just me. But my point was, we have a county engineer employee that works for the city. He works at the county half-time. Mm-hmm. How we were not made aware, how we didn't have the contractual agreement, those things are very disturbing to me, especially when I give them in the neighborhood of $40,000 to $50,000 annually.
Right.
We give them.
Well, I sign off every month on a $4,000 invoice that goes to the county for the service.
So you had said hopefully this won't happen again. Have there been any measures put in place to ensure this doesn't happen again?
And when it happened at 06, if I said 06, I'm sorry, I got 16. I got 16. When it happened in 16, they supposedly put these measures in place. It didn't happen last year. And that's why I'm frustrated. probably more than you all are, because it shouldn't, there's no reason for it to happen, especially when we have an employee of the county engineer in this office.
Right.
I think maybe we ought to tell them, you do it again, it's
We're not
on
going to
you.
pay it.
It's on you. That way they're forewarned, they know.
I mean, it really, honestly, it puts me in the position to question whether or not we should use the county bidding anymore. Only because we shouldn't do things like this. If I did this, you have every right to be upset at me. I would never do that to you all. I would bid it, bring you the results, ask you to pass the contract. We'd go through that process formally. We're doing it now. We haven't started the work there. And it just puts me into an odd situation that they already started the work and the county executive hasn't signed the contract yet. There's a lot more process that hasn't been followed. It's problematic.
So I guess my next question would be, does Summit County Council aware of this situation?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I think it's a conversation that we'll be having.
Okay, thank you.
Again, the county engineer is a separate elected office who isn't really subservient to the county executive. So it's one of those situations where you have separate elected officials.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, I'd like to move that we move this to tonight's agenda of the City Council.
I second.
We have a motion second to add this to tonight's agenda for its first reading. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Courant,
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor,
Yes.
It would be full.
it's going to be full, okay, thank you. Mr. McClone,
Yes.
Mr. Towesley,
Yes.
Ms. Whipke,
Yes.
Mr. Kernan,
Yes.
Mr. Pelot.
Yes. Next item under Committee of the Whole, ordinance to amend Rudsick paving agreement, and that also falls under Mr. Krant.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe we've also discussed this somewhat in the past. We need to bring this up for tonight, I believe. Is there further discussion, though? Do we have some insight, Mr. Fowler?
Well, we in March, I believe it was March 26th. I apologize, I can't recall the date. We passed a contract with Rudsick. Due to the damage that was done during the construction, I wanted to add it to the contract and make sure we have some formal documentation as to such. And that's what we're asking here. There's no monetary change to the contract. It's $88,000. We're adding the police parking lot to it.
Any questions or further discussion? Hearing none, I'd like to move that we add this to tonight's agenda.
I second again.
Motion and second to add ordinance 75, 2018 to tonight's agenda. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Courant,
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor,
Yes.
Mr. McClone,
Yes.
Mr. Towesley,
Yes.
Ms. Whipke,
Yes.
Mr. Kernan,
Yes.
Mr. Pelot.
Yes. Any other committees have anything to discuss or add?
Mr.
Yes.
Pelot, if I could just mention, and this may not be the right place to put it in, we're going to have a Board of Health meeting this Thursday, and it's time for me to make a quarterly report. If you want to add me to a future agenda, just let me know.
Okay. Communications from the public. We have one this evening. Joe Casey, please give your name and address to the stenographer, and you have 5 minutes.
Joe Casey, 3141 Monterey Drive. I want to talk to you guys about the Blue Line Solutions. Do some research. I've done some. There are several lawsuits that are pending. The most recent one was a federal judge ordered New Miami, Ohio, to pay over $3 million back for every person that received a ticket for this. Just wanted to put that little bit of information out there in case anybody doesn't.
What city? I'm sorry.
New Miami, Ohio. It's a little small town just south of Columbus. That was back in November 2017 is when they were ordered to pay over $3 million back. Another thing that I have with that is I don't agree with the fact that it goes into the 140 fund. I think some of the money should go back into the residents, put some back into the road fund a little sooner than the 250,000. Thank you.
That's all for communications from the public this evening. Consideration of minutes. Any changes, additions, or alterations to the minutes of the regular council meeting, May 29th, 2018? Hearing none, they will be accepted as submitted. Any corrections, additions, or alterations of the minutes of the committee work session of June 4th, 2018? Hearing none, we will accept those as submitted. Reports from officers, boards, and commissions, starting with the mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have nothing at this time.
Mr. Fowler?
A couple items of note. The driveway construction has began for the recycling bins. We had the recycling bins moved in order to facilitate a drop-off for them. That won't be open for about a week to 10 days once they pour it, depending on the weather. It'll be poured this week, either Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. In the course of us doing that work, you may notice there's a very large puddle on the easterly side of Columbia Woods Drive. We are going to remove that concrete in the next day or so, and when they pour the concrete for the drive, we're going to fix the street. So Columbia Woods Drive will be down to one lane at the southern portion. During the construction, we did notify the folks next door. But just two things of note that you might see. Also wanted to let you know that I think today the fence was delivered for Western Star. At least it was supposed to be. If it's not here today, it has to be here tomorrow because they'll be starting installation on Wednesday. So some things, we have a lot going on. The paving's going on Nash Heights. Hope that that's done in the next few weeks. I don't really have a timeline, just weather dependent. The plant broke down. There's just a whole host of factors. But so some of those constituents in that area hopefully will get some relief from the rough roads here in the near future. That's all I have.
With the recycle bins, will they be open? Will they be accessible?
They are open and they are accessible. I did speak to Republic. They actually moved them for me this morning at my request. So they people can, they were empty this morning. So hopefully in the next, well, if everybody recycles that quickly, we're very happy, but I'm sure that they have 10 days to fill them up. So.
Thank you. Thank you for the fence. Short group. Bigger than last week, but short. We have no public hearings this evening. Introduction of new legislation, Ordinance 69, 2018, falls under my committee, Finance. I'd like to offer Ordinance 69, 2018 for its first reading and ask clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance to amend the appropriations for the current expenses of the City of Norton for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2018, and declaring an emergency.
And that is first reading only. Next item, Ordinance 70, 2018. Also under Finance, I'd like to offer Ordinance 70, 2018 for its first reading and ask clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance accepting the bid of Parent Asphalt Company Incorporated to complete the 2018 street paving project and declaring an emergency.
That is first reading only, and what we're currently looking at is this along with the Summit County Engineer's Office contract and also the Rudzik paving agreement, amending that. Next Monday night, we'll have a Board of Control meeting, and after the regular committee work session meeting, we will have a special meeting to take care of these three items so we can go ahead and get these road projects underway. Next item, Ordinance 71, 2018. Mr. McGlone.
Thank you, Mr. President. I offer ordinance 71, 2018 for its first reading. Ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance to authorize the administrative officer to enter into an agreement with Blue Line Solutions LLC and declaring an emergency.
First reading only.
Next item, ordinance 72, 2018, also Mr. McGlone.
Thank you, Mr. President. I offer ordinance 72, 2018 for its first reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance adopting a traffic law photo monitoring program and establishing civil penalties for automated speed violations.
First reading only. Thank you.
Next item, ordinance 73, 2018, Mr. Krant. Or no, this also falls under Mr. McGlone.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I offer ordinance 73, 2018 for its first reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance adding Chapter 868 to the codified ordinances of the city to prohibit the sale of cigarettes, other tobacco products, and tobacco product paraphernalia to individuals under the age of 21, authorizing a contract with the Summit County Combined General Health District to implement these provisions through regulations.
First reading only.
And then we have added ordinance 74, 2018, Mr. Krant.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this time, I'd offer ordinance 74, 2018 for its first reading. Ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance authorizing the administrative officer to execute and deliver an agreement to participate in the Summit County Engineers Office road maintenance program and declaring an emergency.
First reading only.
Next item, added ordinance 75, 2018, Mr. Krant.
Thank you, Mr. President. Like this time, I offer ordinance 75, 2018 for its first reading. Ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance amending ordinance number 32-2018, the proposal of Rudzik Excavating Incorporated, in an amount not to exceed $88,000 for the repaving of Little Boulevard, Brookside Court, and Shellhart Drive to include the police driveway and parking lot, and declaring an emergency.
It's first reading only, please.
Mr. President,
Yes.
before we go on to the prior legislations, I wanted to go back to ordinance 71, 2018. And I was under the impression we were going, and I know that it's included in ordinance 72, 2018, as far as the language or the
Enforcement.
yes, being only during the project on the widening. And that we could end. I think it would be a good idea to also have that language in ordinance 71, 2018, just to make sure that that Blue Line Solutions is well aware of the fact that when that construction's done, we're done.
I want to make sure I understood I didn't hear what you said. I just want to make sure I essentially got the gist of what you were trying to say.
She wanted to have the verbiage in 72 added to 71, saying that it's just for the duration of the
And
construction.
also, if we could put in they're not going to have anything done unless it's 65 or over.
And Charlotte, can I say one thing? We are going to be discussing this again at the next committee meeting, so if you want to save that stuff, we can do that there also.
Right, well, I just want to give them
Okay.
soon enough heads up. They all
That's
know
fine.
what they ought to be working on.
Okay.
I will email the law director and let him know.
Thank you.
All right. Introduction of prior legislation, Resolution 60, 2018, Mr. Towsley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I offer Resolution 60, 2018 for its third reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
A resolution confirming the appointment of Thomas Marino II to a 2-year term as a representative on the Local Board of Income Tax Review of the City of Norton and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to make a motion to adopt Resolution 60, 2018.
Second.
Motion and second to adopt Resolution 60, 2018. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Towsley?
Yes.
Mr. Curriant?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McGlone?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Mr. Pilot?
Yes.
Mr. President, if I may real quick, I just want to thank Mr. Marino for his willingness to serve on this board.
Mr. President,
Yes,
this gives us our three people, our final person, correct?
correct.
And that would be Mr. Markey, Susan Boyer, and now Thomas Marino II.
Correct.
Thank you.
And just for everybody's information, when we go ahead and we appoint these people and we vote on them, there's no formal notification back to that individual. So Carrie and I were talking the other day, and we decided that we would go ahead and draft a formal letter, send it out to them, along with a copy of the actual signed resolution, letting them know that, everything passed and that they're now serving on whichever board. Yes, sir.
If I would like to make a suggestion that in that, I mean, if council wants to send that to me, there are a couple things that I've been doing with the boards and commissions relative to training.
Okay.
I'd like to include that in as well as maybe the rules of the committee that they serve. Or
Sounds good.
Just to make sure that they,
Training.
Yep.
essentially, we're just putting people on boards, and we want to make sure that they have an idea of what they should.
What's
kinda
expected.
yeah.
Yep.
Help them be prepared for their role.
Yes.
And while we're on the subject, I don't believe this is a paid seat at all, is it? This is all voluntary, correct?
Any other discussion on that? Any unfinished business?
I have one, actually, Mr.
Yes.
President. Actually, I have two. I have a question. I don't know if the administration can answer me. There's a little pie of land at Johnson and Worcester Road right across from the Johnson Church. Is that Barberton's responsibility or Norton's responsibility? Do you know?
You know that empty spot where everybody used to put all the political signs there across from Johnson Church. It's right across the street.
Right at the light.
Right at
I'll
the
have
light
to
there.
look, and I can look and let you
Okay.
know.
The grass has just not been cut at all this year, and we expect residents to. If it's ours, we should cut it as well. So, my other question.
Before you go forward
Sure.
with that, based on a conversation that Mr. Fowler and I had the other day, houses that are not cutting their lawns, the city is running a little bit behind, so just bear with the city. They're trying to get caught up, but between the weather and everything else.
And we did, and just for council's information, we did contact some private companies to try to see if we could get their assistance in catching up. We have not been that successful due to some worker shortages. So if you all know someone that owns a landscaping company or something to that effect, please put them in contact with us. We are trying to solicit proposals to get these lawns cut. The problem we have, just like today, we probably got some cut today, but tomorrow and Wednesday it's supposed to rain. If so we're getting further behind. We posted 2 more yards today. It's very difficult to catch up once you're behind. So we looked at outsourcing some of that temporarily to catch up. So I may be coming to council asking for appropriation or transfer to allow us to pay for some of that because we just can't keep up with it.
And
We'll assess
ultimately,
naturally at the end. I was going to say, we'll assess at the end, but if we're going to hire and outsource,
Right.
we'll need pay for upfront and then recoup it on the backside, so.
that's just what I was going to say. So
Right.
ultimately, it shouldn't cost the city any money. We should be reimbursed at the end of the day. And Mr. Fowler and I were also talking about that. And, I mean, it's 90-some% on that, recouping those funds. So we're doing well there so far.
Mr. President, I have a question along with that,
Okay.
along with the lawn problems. We had a complaint today, and evidently we have a promise of a complaint every week until it's fixed, on Golf Course Drive. And we had a discussion last week about ownership and who manages Golf Course Drive. My question is the city responsible for having those properties cut? Or is that Joe Flog and his corporation?
It
Who's
fall upon the city. The street, the only thing that's private is the street. The residents would
households
still
are
be,
not.
they
Okay.
would still be required to follow all applicable laws in the city. So if you give me that address, I will get it to
Very good.
Mr.
Thank you.
Hess. And just so council understands, all those requests go to the service department. Service department goes, confirms the height, posts it, and then subsequently the service person cuts the grass after the posting period. So, in case somebody has a question.
Mr. Towesley, you had one other item?
Yeah, one other thing, and this would be for the administration again. Do we have a timeline on when final assessments will be made for Nash Heights yet?
The final assessments are not able to be assessed until the complete project is done. So until the paving and everything is done, I can't even tell you what the total cost is. Simple, because until all the pavement is down, the pavement's per quantity, so it's per cubic yard or per square feet, whatever, however they bid it. And we won't know what that number is until the entire project is complete.
So safe to say at least after the break, likely.
Yeah, I don't believe there's any way for us. I mean, they're 2 weeks out on the paving, so the likelihood, I would agree, it would be after break at the earliest. Now, what I can try to find out, but my guess is it's going to be middle of July, which means we won't assess till September. So these folks won't even see that assessment until next September, just so we understand that we're about a year behind.
Well, it doesn't take place in January. It takes place.
No, they only do assessments in September.
Okay. Thank you.
And it's not that we're trying to delay it, it's just how, I mean, the weather's not been conducive to paving, and we still have some grass that needs planted. So we still have some work that needs to be done. And unfortunately, until all that's done, I wouldn't even bring you a final assessment, because that's, until the project's complete, we're not ready.
Does that include the fencing around the pump station?
Yes, sir, it does.
Okay, great.
Ms. Whipke?
Thank you. I'd just like to mention that we still need people for the tax incentive board. And wasn't Mr. Spisak interested in this?
He did volunteer, and he is appointed, but we still need another member.
Two. Don't we need two from
Yes.
council yet?
I believe council does
Approves, but it comes from the mayor. But
Yeah.
we're still soliciting applicants.
Yeah, we, on that, as well as the BZA alternate.
So if you know anybody that would like to serve on either of these boards, please contact the city.
But this would be unpaid, this particular board, while the BZA, for the public's information, is a paid seat.
Right. It's an at-large, it's an alternate at-large position on BZA, though.
Right, and when they have to come in and take the seat as an alternate, then they are paid for that meeting.
Correct.
The rest of the time, they're not, whether they attend or not. Thank you.
Any other unfinished business? New business? Public service announcements? Anything from administration?
Not at this time.
Okay. Just kind of a quick update. I was talking with Mr. Fowler today regarding the bridge over 224 there, 76. And trying to understand what's going on there. They've been working on it for a long time on one side. The contract states that they have till like 2020 to complete that project. It has nothing to do with the city. City has no input on that bridge contract. That is through ODOT, and there's not a whole lot we can do with it. Kenmore Construction is just taking their good old time for whatever the reasons may be, but so it looks, from what I can see, that we're going to have to endure that for quite a bit longer.
Retaining walls are also going up at this point.
Yeah, the retaining walls look great. I think the residents along the highway there should be very happy with the sound blockage.
Sound walls, yeah.
So,
Excuse me, let me, before you,
yes.
those sound walls, do we know exactly where all they're going to be? I mean, are they going to be the entire length of this project?
If you look to see I'm assuming that based off of where they've cleared back so far on certain areas, like if you look there by, if you're going 224 west, it's not cleared off to the side there. It's just like warehouses down in there, businesses. So I don't think that something's going on there to protect the sound from those businesses. But on the home side, you can see where they've cleared back, they've cut down the trees, and so I'm assuming that that's where the sound barrier is going to go, is all down through those areas that they've cleared back.
When this started about, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, at that point, I know there was I won't say a meeting, but I know that residents along there, they consider that noise-sensitive areas, and the state made that determination as to where the noise-sensitive areas were. And I think, as my understanding, had sent letters to the residents adjoining or adjacent to that area that the sound walls were coming. So it is my belief, I would think that there's some measurement somewhere, that there's where the walls will start and where the walls will stop. I don't know that we as a city have that.
A couple of the reasons I asked, I know Mr. Perkins has brought it up a couple of times about the excessive noise from the highway, even where he lives, and anyway, if there's something available that shows the location of the future walls, it doesn't take them long to put them up. I noticed once they start on them, so it doesn't take long at all. The other question on the walls was, I noticed that there's some interesting plaques included in the walls, and I love them. They say Tree City and Norton and whatever. I wondered how those came about and who suggested those particular plaques, and if those other walls that are going up haven't been designed yet for plaques. I have some suggestions.
Okay, well, the suggestions, we were kind of under, I won't say strict orders, but they gave us some guidance as to what we were kind of allowed to use. The Tree City, the one that says Norton naturally, the Wolf Creek, because it's the Wolf Creek Conservation. I mean, there had to be, as far as panthers and that kind of stuff, that's not what they wanted. That was back when Valerie was here. We went through kind of at the beginning and made some suggestions, and then some got approved and some did not. But that was early on.
So all of the walls that are going to be built have pretty much been decided as to what's going to go on them.
Well, we didn't decide on where they were going to go. We just basically, whatever you see as far as, I think there's like 4 different insignias, and those will just be continually used throughout the project.
Okay, so the same ones will go in different spots.
Yes.
Okay, could you possibly look and see if there is a list or an area where the walls are going to go? Somebody must have that.
Yeah, I'm sure that it's available. I don't have it, but at this point in time.
No, I just in the future.
It's my understanding too, the bridge over Cleveland Massillon, and hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but one of the things that we did request was that the Norton insignia get put on that particular bridge, since it was in our center of town at Cleveland Massillon. At that time, we were told that it would, just kind of anticipating and anxiously waiting to see that gets done that way. It's my understanding that that bridge will be hand poured. Some bridges are done by a cast, I guess, and some are hand poured. This particular one will be hand poured. That was decided not by us but by them from the beginning, and therefore we were told back then that it would be fairly easy to put the insignia into the side of the bridge. So we're hoping to see that up and coming.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other public service announcements? Hearing none, then meeting's adjourned.